I'm now in a spot that I come to when I do meditation or yoga. It's a really quiet spot in the woodland that I find really relaxing and peaceful to spend time alone, and also to do reading and everything like that. So as it's like loads of people are in isolation right now, I just wanted to talk about some books that I'm reading. The books that I'm reading right now, or in the process of reading, I read one of them already, and halfway through the other two, and that is The Stranger in the Woods, which is probably one of my favourite books that I've ever read. It's a story on meditation, solitude, wilderness and survival, and it truly is a breathtaking book. It's really inspiring, and I'll talk about that book in more detail. Another one of the books is The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. He's a spiritual teacher and has a lot of great wisdom and insight into the present moment, and says that that's how we should live our lives. So really interesting book. Talks a lot about meditation and the spiritual side of things. So if you're wanting to spend more time in the now and forget about the past and how to live in the present, I definitely recommend that book. And a guy that I'm really inspired by is Carl Jung, and this book is on memory, dreams and reflections. He just has a great mind, and is a very wise man. He talks about his insight on dreams and how he reflects them to his daily life and his consciousness, delving into the unconscious, and how he learns from his dreams. Yeah, so it's just a great read, loads of wisdom. So yeah, I'm going to read parts of like each book as well, and I just wanted to explain more about The Stranger in the Woods and how this book really touched me and why I really enjoyed reading it. So this book is about a guy who escaped when he was 20 years old to go and live in the woods, and he lived in solitary in the woods for 27 years, and I just find that so inspiring and crazy that this guy could spend that long living outside. And it's really insightful and just gives loads of wisdom during this book, and sort of all of these three books sort of relate in some way because they've all gained wisdom from obviously being outside and spending time alone. And I learnt from this book, there's a lot of quotes in this book as well about a lot of people that have obviously spent time alone in nature sort of come to the same conclusion of advice and great spiritual wisdom. So when he left, his name was Christopher Knight, he left with no prior experience to the outdoors. He never slept in a tent before, but his family lived off grid and they were a very secretive family, and he had a great upbringing, a great life, but he just decided that it just wasn't obviously enough for him, like something was missing from his life. And he drove out. He lived in Maine. He drove out one day and decided to throw his keys and car and just went into the woods, where he lived the next 27 years of his life. He like set up a camp there. He stayed there and obviously lived as a hermit, but he stole from people's houses to get his food and obviously essential things that he needed. So he lived in Maine, North Pond, this location. This was his camp setup. So he was obviously a person that spent many years in solitary, and it's very inspiring to read his view and take on it, because I'm also very interested in Buddhism and monks and hermits as well, who just go off and spend a long duration of time on their own, and how they learn from this and how they are able to do that, because obviously some people can crumble under immense solitude, obviously, like prisoners, people that are left to solitary confinement. And it speaks about that in this book, how it's not obviously for everyone, because you have to go to the depths and darkness of your own self to feel comfortable within yourself and to be able to sit with yourself for that long. In the book, this one woman who spent 12 years in a cave, and a prisoner who said it was the worst experience of his life, because obviously we are social animals or social beings, and we love interaction and everything like that. So these people that go off and do these insights into themselves in solitary, I find really interesting, because the most duration that I've probably done alone is probably a day, or obviously an overnight camp out. So it's probably 24 hours, I'd probably say, that I've properly done truly alone. And I also done a isolation tank before, which was only an hour and a half, but that was obviously in complete silence, no other surroundings, because I feel like when you're in nature, you never really are truly alone, because you obviously got the trees to connect with and the birds and the wildlife. But that was total, when I was in the isolation tank, that was total self-isolation and deprivation, and that was a really different experience altogether. It was very different from anything I've ever done. It just feels as if you're floating, and obviously you've got no sound coming in, complete silence, and no light either. You really obviously go into yourself and your own mind, and you just feel weightless, and obviously it just strips you away of everything, really. And I feel like these people that spend all this time outside, it just really reveals the truth of who you are and your identity and what we really are as human beings, and how much of our lives we try to structure and is lived within the egoic front. So it is crazy when you really think about it, how much time you are interacting and around people, and how much time you are with others and not solely with yourself, which I find in our modern society today is that we don't really spend enough time alone with our own selves. We're always trying to put on a front and a mask when we're around other people. So I feel like in these times it's going to allow more people to spend more time with themselves inside, to know what they truly want from life and who they truly are, and just to take a minute to slow down and relax, I think, which is really important. So just a question for you guys, just comment below, because it's quite interesting to see how much time you've actually spent alone, to see other people's viewpoints. So just comment below how much time that you've spent alone in your life. So that can range from hours to days to weeks to months. Just take a minute to think about it, of how much time you've spent to yourself, and just focusing on the atmosphere around you, just living in that present moment and not thinking about anything else. Let me know what you've learnt from it, and if you enjoyed it, if you continue to do it, or if it was just a one-time thing. So yeah, I'll carry on with talking about this guy and what his insights were from spending 27 years alone. So yeah, this is a book written about Christopher Knight. I won't say too much of the book and everything that happened. I'll just read a few pages, because you might want to purchase the book and read it for yourself, so I don't want to ruin it too much. So just read a page. And what happened to him in the woods, Knight claimed, was inexplicable, but he agreed to set aside his fear of phony wisdom and cones and give it a try. It's complicated, he said. Solitude bestows an increase in something valuable. I can't dismiss that idea. Solitude increased my perception, but here's the tricky thing. When I applied my increased perception to myself, I lost my identity. There was no attitude, no one to perform for. There was no need to define myself. I became irrelevant. So yeah, that's a really, really crazy point to make, of how much our lives we spent in an identity of ourselves, our peers, who we should be, the person that we are. We all put on like a front of our identity to show like who you are. This is me, this is my personality, this is what I do. So we're turning ourselves like into a somebody, and that is creating obstacles in the long run for ourselves, because we're always trying to live up to that identity. So we're living more in the egoic mind than in the present. He obviously learnt from his time outside that nature really strips you down to what you are and who you really are. You're no better or no worse than a bird or a deer or the trees. You just are just like everything else within nature. But obviously within the Western society, we look at ourselves as something special and the need to achieve something and gain something beyond ourselves and greater than ourselves. But we actually miss the real meaning of life. I think that's what you learn from sort of these people have learnt from, and probably a lot of you have learnt from spending time, or if you've spent time outside, that it's really the simple things in life that mean the most. So that's obviously what Christopher Knight learnt, and obviously he loved that. He learnt that he didn't need to define himself anymore and look to society's needs and act in that way. So the dividing line between himself and the forest, Knight said, seemed to dissolve. His isolation felt more like communion. My desires dropped away. I didn't long for anything. I didn't have a name. To put it romantically, I was completely free. Virtually everyone who has written about deep solitude has said some version of the same thing. And I think that's very true from reading other books and reading these books as well. They all sort of interlink in some way. When you are alone, your awareness of time and boundaries grows fuzzy. The loss of self is precisely what Knight experienced in the forest. In public, one always wears a social mask. Even when you're alone and look in the mirror, you are acting, which is one reason Knight never kept a mirror in his camp. He let go of all. He became no one and everyone. Knight simply existed for the most part in the perceptual now. He does not care if people fail to understand what he did in the woods. He didn't do it for us to understand. He wasn't trying to prove a point. There was no point. You were just there, Knight said. You are. which is really, really wise words of wisdom there. And it is very true. In society, everyone does wear a mask and tries to act a certain way towards everyone and their peers, and they can never become truly themselves, because they have to feel that they have to look up, they have to act a certain way and be a certain way. And a great quote that I love in this book is, "It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society." And that is probably one of my favourite quotes, because it's very true. And in society, everyone expects you to act a certain way and be a certain way, but it's no measure of health to obviously be adjusted to that, to adjusted to the system and how it wants you to operate. Which is why I feel that sometimes if you don't follow that way of the system, you become sort of an outsider, someone that's sort of different. And obviously people would look at Christopher Knight and think he's very different. There's something abnormal about him, but it's just because that he just didn't adjust to the system in ways that are wanted and expected of you. So he felt like he didn't belong in that environment, and I feel a lot of people today feel as though they don't belong, and you'll see why there's a lot of anxiety and depression, because people don't feel free to be who they want to be. They're not allowed. So that's obviously why certain people go off and do these endeavours, become hermits, become monks, is because they fit into a different society, in one that fits their needs and suits their needs and allow them to be that certain way. Which is why Christopher Knight done what he done, but obviously he done it in an illegal way, as he did steal from people's cabins. But he obviously had to escape and felt suited into that way of life, which I find profoundly inspiring and astonishing. As I read further in the book, what I didn't like is, obviously psychiatrists tried to label him as he had like Asperger's disorder and depression, and yeah, so but people just try to label him as why he done what he done, but couldn't allow him to just be as he was. So a great part of this book, what I like, is he felt because the world is not made to accommodate people like him. He was never happy in his youth, not in high school, not with a job, not being around other people. It made him feel constantly nervous. There was no place for him, and instead of suffering further, he escaped. It wasn't so much a protest as a quest. He was like a refuge from the human race. The forest offered him shelter. I did it because the alternative was I wasn't content, says Knight. I did find a place where I was content. I think most of us feel like something is missing from our lives, and I wonder if Knight's journey was to seek it. But life isn't about searching endlessly to find what's missing. It's about learning to live with the missing parts. Knight had been away too long, and it seemed that there was no coming back. So yeah, he'd obviously spent too long out in the woods for too long, that he had changed and adjusted too much away from what society asks of you. And I won't say too much about read any more of this bit, even though I really want to, and it's great words, because that would just ruin the book. But yeah, I'd really recommend this book if you're into solitude, the wilderness, meditation, survival. It really does cover all aspects, and it definitely is up there. It probably is my favourite book, or one of my favourite books. I really think that we can learn a lot from Christopher Knight about how, most of all, how we do wear masks, and which in the long run can make us feel worse about ourselves, that we're having to be that certain way. But I think if you are different or you don't fit in, I think you shouldn't feel wrong for feeling that way. It's just that you have to find your own alternative to which suits you, and an environment where you feel like you can belong and you feel at peace within that environment. I definitely would suggest getting this book if you haven't already read it, if you're looking for a good read, and also comment below any books that you suggest me getting and reading, because I love a good book, who doesn't? Especially in the times that we're in as well, as we have so much free time right now. So I'm just going to read a passage from Memories, Dreams and Reflections of what Carl Jung wrote, and says a bit about what this book is about. So I've read just over half so far, and it's been very wise read. In this book, I have devoted considerable space to my subjective view of the world, which, however, is not a product of rational thinking. It is rather a vision such as will come to one who undertakes, deliberately, with half-closed eyes and somewhat closed ears, to see and hear the form and voice of being. If our impressions are too distant, we are held to the hour and minute of the present, and have no way of knowing how our ancestral psychics listen to and understand the present. In other words, how our unconscious is responding to it. Thus we remain ignorant of whether our ancestral components find an elementary gratification in our lives, or whether they are repelled. Inner peace and contentment depend in large measure upon whether or not the historical family, which is inherent in the individual, can be harmonized with the conditions of the present. In the tower, which is where he lived in his later life, it is as if one lived in many centuries simultaneously. The place will outlive me, and in its location and style it points backwards to things of long ago. There is very little about it to suggest the present. If a man of the 16th century were to move into the house, only the kerosene lamp and the matches would be new to him. Otherwise he would know his way about without difficulty. There is nothing to disturb the dead, neither electric light nor telephone. Moreover, my ancestors' souls are obtained by the atmosphere of the house, since I answer for them the questions that the lives once left behind. I crave out rough answers as best as I can. I even drawn them on the walls. It is as if a silent, greater family stretching down the centuries were peopling in the house. There I lived with my second personality, and see life is in the round as something forever, coming into being and passing on. And he also said, a good quote in this book, that it's crazy how difficult the simple things are. Because they really are. It's crazy that they're so simple, but they're difficult, and they take a lot of time, and a lot of meaning goes into them. So he's obviously speaking about how important it is to live within that, in that present moment, and how the trees, so these trees that I'm sitting in, will live long after me and have lived long before me, and how everything is coming into being and passing on, and is just flowing through, passing on like the river. So really really great words in there. So I just want to end up on speaking about a book that has actually really changed my life in many ways, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And he gives great spiritual advice and guidance, speaks about how to transcend yourself into the present moment, and speaks a lot about meditation and not looking to the past or not seeking the future. And I feel that that's, in these times, we're finding it hard to just live and focus on the now, because we're always searching for a future, always looking to the future within our society. And obviously now that this pandemic has hit, we are stuck just with this moment, and we can't seek to find the future right now or live for the future. And I feel that that's what a lot of us find very difficult, is to be solely in the now and in the present moment. He just speaks a lot about being in the moment and how obviously living for the future causes a lot of anxiety and a lot of uncertainty, and our egos need to fulfill that, when all we need to do is be with ourselves now, and just take a minute to look around at our environment, connect better with our family and peers, and not take them for granted so much. So this is a good time for us to be spending with our families, reading that great book. So just take a minute of your day to feel at peace and feel at one through whether that be meditation or reading your favourite book, or even just sitting down, listening to music, or if you can get outside, listening to the birds. Surrounding yourself within nature really helps. So I hope that you all stay safe and take up these times to spend with your family, reading a book and enjoying the now. Just be here right now. So I wish everyone the best. Thank you for all your comments on my last video, it means so much. And if you like the video, please subscribe. And actually I want to say, if anyone's got any questions they want to ask me, go ahead, I'll answer them questions on my next video, as I've obviously asked you guys some questions about how much time you've spent in solitary by yourself. And that is also my aim when being out here, is to spend more time alone, within meditation and within being and accepting the present moment. So thanks for watching this video. I will see you guys in the next video.